Well, good evening, everybody. This is Adrian joining you once again, this time from the garden here at Taylor's. You can see behind me the beautiful rose garden, which is really, on a day like today, a hot summer's day here in Porto, looking quite magnificent. And I think that's been one of the things this year, that the natural cycle of vegetation has been so extraordinary, and of course shows how nature continues to do very well. But I am joined this evening by Etienne Bizot, who is the great nephew of Madame Bollinger. Bollinger is part of the Sociedad Jacques Bollinger group, which Etienne leads. It has investments in wine regions, predominantly in France, but elsewhere in the world. And it's my pleasure to welcome Etienne to this conversation. Etienne, how nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Adrian, and nice to have all these people listening to us.
It's I see behind you, actually, you have the Madame Bollinger's house in Eye shown as a photograph. Is that right, or am I making that up?
A bit. You're making it up a bit. I am actually in my office in Paris after 2 months of confinement outside Paris, and very pleased to be back in the office. But we had great time with my family during these 2 months, great time. And so I'm in the office, and behind me, what you can see is the house of Bollinger. It's not Mrs. Bollinger House. All our offices are in Aix, in just south of us.
And indeed, behind that house, I think I'm right in saying, you have an extremely special vineyard that is walled in with amazing old vines, which makes one of the rather more extraordinary of the beautiful range of champagnes you make. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's what we call the vieille vigne française. These vineyards are non-graft. And in fact, we always had these vineyards non-graft behind the office. It's about 30% of an hectare. And one day, an English journalist called Cyril Ray, he's unfortunately passed away, suggested to Tante Lily, to Mrs. Bollinger, why don't you simply produce a wine out of it? And she did it. And it's now a wine which has a great concentration with a very low yield, a very high density in the vineyards, about 20,000 plants an hectare, as when we talk in the other vineyards, it's about 8,000 plants an hectare. And it's 100% Pinot Noir, it's 100% Grand Cru. It's a tiny production, one of the greatest champagne wines I've ever drank.
Well, of course, that there are many that you probably had, because your house is famous not just for the vieille vigne, but the RD and other wines. I suppose for many people listening, they probably are more familiar with the special Cuvee. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to happen?
Yeah, well, I was just raising a glass of Bollinger Special Cuvée, by the way. We're very proud of it. It's really the best expression of the Bollinger style. Very much linked to his favorite grape variety, which is a Pinot Noir, because we have a big percentage of vines in Aix and other village of Pinot Noir. So it's a great wine with a lot of power and a lot of intensity. It's a wine which is 2/3 of Pinot Noir. We also include some reserve wines, and it's unique in Champagne, store and age in magnums for quite a long time before being blended in the Special Cuvée blend. And afterwards, we age these wines for about 3 or 4 years before proposing us to customers.
Oh, I think we have a bottle here. I haven't actually opened this one, but it looks rather fine. Of course, you've had this more distinctive bottle shape for about 5 or 6 years now. I mean, it's so elegant.
Yeah, we changed the shape, and it has a history. This bottle has a history, by the way, because Guillaume Montgolfier, who used to run the business before me, discovered an old bottle in a deep cellar somewhere around, and he copied it, and all our wines now are sold within this shape, which has the characteristic to be a kind of a half magnum, which, I know the good proportion between the air and the wine.
I think a half magnum is a wonderful way to describe a bottle. But one thing that always excites me about Champagne Bollinger is that below all of your operations there in Eye, you have a huge network of tunnels. I don't know how many kilometers, but an extraordinary space in which you can get lost with so many bottles and magnums maturing. How many kilometers do you actually have?
There is about 6 kilometers of cellars in under the city of Aix. And when you visit Bollinger, you are going to the office on the road, and you're going back to Mrs. Bollinger House through the cellars, and you can see few bottles during your trip.
I think there's some rumors one hears occasionally that with all those tunnels, there's some great secret lair underneath, which is, of course, habited by international spies, which is why really Champagne Bollinger is the favorite of 007. Is there any truth in that, or is it just that the man's got good taste?
I think the man's got good taste. I think, yeah.
But tell us, because I know there was going to be a new James Bond movie this year, which I believe has been delayed because of coronavirus. Do you have news as to when he is next going to be out with his bottle of Bollinger and sorting out the world?
Of course, James Bond is very loyal to Bollinger. He loved it. All the actors love Bollinger, and they're very loyal to it. The film is supposed to be launched mid of November. So that's the only news I have. We don't. It all depends, on whether the cinema will reopen. They saying in France that they should reopen cinemas in July, but they will have to keep spaces, 1 meters between people. So I don't know. I don't know whether it's going to be launched, but it's all depends on this. It's all depends on this.
Yeah. Now, the other thing, of course, is that whilst we've all been locked down, nature has been continuing very well with lots of rain, and there's a lot of verdant growth. Certainly, we're seeing it here in the Taylor's house in the middle of, and I'm sitting in the middle of a city here in Porto. There's a cockerel that keeps making a noise. I think he's somewhat confused as the time of day, but I know that climate change is something that you and your group are very close to. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what's been happening this year in your growing season.
Yeah, well, at the moment we are, as all over Europe, we're facing quite a sunny weather, hot weather. But it started, and I've listened to what Philippe Igal said in your previous talk, was a lot of rains during winter. We've measured that we had double the quantity of rains that we used to have within the last four months of 2019. So we went over, and then we were afraid by the frost. There was some big risk of frost in Champagne, as well as the other part of France, by the way. And finally, we passed over the Ice Saints, and now we are a bit anxious about when these harvests will start. There are big talks about, starting to harvest before the end of August, beginning of September, middle of August. So that's all the kind of nature now. We will see. Yeah.
But of course, your group is involved in many regions because you've got some. I think I'm right in saying that you're the largest landowner in Grand Cru of Burgundy, aren't you? Or am I making that up?
I would love.
But you're with Chanson, you're a very substantial player in that region, aren't you?
We're a substantial player, and unfortunately not in Grand Cru, Adrian, but in first growth, Premier Cru in Côte de Beaune. Yeah, we have 40 hectares of Premier Cru Côte de Beaune. So it's unfortunately not in our Grand Cru at this time, but maybe next time.
But you have also a business very close to ours in some ways, and that is with the Delamain Cognac, where you age wines for many years in barrels as we age our aged tawnies. And tell us a little bit about that, because that's an extraordinary old business and has managed to hold on to great independence and some wonderful styles of what it makes. Tell us a little bit more, if you can, about the Delamain Cognacs.
Yeah, it's for me. I've always described Delama as a jewel. Is producing and proposing to the customers the finest eau de vie. I don't know how to say in English. Spirits from Cognac, only from Grand Champagne. It's a very old house, more than 200 years old, and tiny productions. Consumers are very loyal to this brand. It's matching very well. You know, you sit down, relax after a good dinner with your friends. You take a big cigar, a glass of Vesper, a glass of Pale and Dry, and simply enjoy it. And it's right in the middle of Jarnac. You know, we're just starting to grow vineyards, by the way, 20 hectares of Grand Champagne, just to be as close as we can, as it is the the DNA of our group, as close as we can from the vineyards, and it's a wonderful brand.
Well, of course, that's where we slightly compete, because I could also argue that a great glass of Taylor's Tawny Port at the end of the meal with a cigar, and indeed with a cockerel crowing in the background, would be a perfect way to round off the meal. But I'm excited because we know very well from our business the quality of spirit that comes from that region, because for our best vintage ports, David Guimarães, our winemaker, always goes to Bordeaux, goes to that region, makes his selection, because it is truly, one of the best areas for making distillate across the world, and or anywhere in the world. And indeed, to then have right in the heart of that the ability to age it for many years. Tell us what is the oldest Delamain that you have? I'm fascinated.
I think it should be back before around 1885, about that. And as you said, that's a secret of Cognac compared to any other spirits part of the world. I think Uni Blanc is playing, the grape variety is playing a part of it, but also the ability of these Cognac houses, because of course Delamain is a great brand, but there are others as well, the ability for them to age spirits as long as they can.
Yeah.
And at one stage, when I was talking about the 1885, we need to take these brands, these spirits, out of the cask and put them in a big glass chunk in order to stop the evolution of the spirits. And it's always fresh. We've launched 6 years ago, a special carafe called the Voyage, and it was a blend of all these, very old spirits from all these old vintages that we have in stock. And it has a great success because I think that the consumers like the complexity of spirits like Delamain. They like it. They like the complexity of these old spirits because it has a lot of complexity.
Well, I think you're touching on an important point there, because many great wine lovers who, whether they bracket their meal and start with a glass of champagne, or indeed a white port. I'm having a white port and tonic. They have their red wines, their white wines, their white burgundies, whatever, and get to a Delamain or a port. I think the wonderful richness of the wine industry is that there are so many different styles, and it's all a wonderful journey of exploration. But tell us, you also have got yet more in your portfolio, because you have very interesting property in the Loire, which is, for anyone who's never been to the Loire, it has to be one of the most extraordinary river valleys with some of the most beautiful chateaus in France, and a place that I absolutely adore going to visit. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in that region, if you can.
Yeah, of course. First thing, you need to visit the Loire Valley. You need to visit the Loire Chateau. It's a big part of the history of France down there. So and then in fact, it was the first ever acquisition from our family outside Bollinger. Back in 1973, it was a house producing sparkling wines, Crémant de Loire, by the way. And then now it's a house which has two major wines, Sancerre, because we have an estate of about 33 hectares of Sancerre, near the city of Sancerre, by the way. And then we are producing and proposing to consumers Crémant de Loire, with a blend of Cabernet and Chardonnay on different brands, and we export them a lot. We exported them a lot in the UK, in the US, in Scandinavia. Amazingly enough, Langres Chateau, who is based in Saumur, is doing 50% of his business outside France. Has globally, it's only 20%, 30%, which is exported. So they're benefiting a lot from the network of all our houses around the world. And I think that it is also benefiting from the growth, attention, or interest of consumers on sparkling.
And just tell us, because you do have such a network around the world, are you already seeing markets in Asia beginning to open up and really recover? Are we seeing things getting back to some sort of normality over there? What's your take on this?
I would say first that we are very proud of our network of agents around the world. They are very good in adapting themselves to what's happening in their markets. We are very much dependent on trade for some of our brands, just like the Burgundy and Nayala, for example, as well. And then when you look market per market, we can say that UK is doing well, and because we partner there, is doing very well. We have a very good team doing a great job on this. But we have, a network of channels which are different. In France, we're suffering more. We're suffering more in France because we're very much dependent on on-trade. And on-trade, we're just waiting for the declaration of our Prime Minister tomorrow, who hopefully will decide to reopen all the on-trade beginning of June. So it's a great expectation from all the wine, huge expectation. And the other part of the world which is doing quite well is Scandinavia. Scandinavia, because it's a monopoly organization selling a lot through retail. Asia, to be frank, it's difficult to say. It's not a big part of our business. I know that Japan will reopen next week, I think, or in 2 weeks from now. I think it's going to be, as usual, a slow reopening. In Hong Kong, we have, business was good. And in China, the business is too small for us just to have a very good idea of what's happening really there.
Yeah. Well, fun enough, talking about restaurants opening, we opened the restaurant here at Taylor's, where we have a small restaurant. In fact, in a room that was originally built for Natasha's and my wedding back in 1989. And it became a restaurant in 1994. And we opened it last Thursday. And actually, people are coming back and they're certainly enjoying that. And in fact, this Friday, we open our 2-star Michelin restaurant that's at the Yateman, a hotel where I know you have visited. You and I have enjoyed a meal there before. So here in Portugal, we are certainly starting to see things come back to normal. Hotels are opening again in the Douro Valley. The Vintage House Hotel on the edge of the River Douro will open in Pinhal this Friday. So things are coming back to normal, which I think is very positive. One gets this, it's almost a snowball effect. It needs 1 or 2 to open, and then everyone feels a little bit more comfortable, and everything else opens. And as people step out of their comfort zones, out of the sort of lock-in that we've had, and discover that there's a beautiful world out there full of beautiful wines, great tasting opportunities, great things to discover. And certainly you at Sociedad Jacques Bollinger, with your portfolio of great wines in France, offer everybody a fantastic journey of exploration around France. And thank you for all the great wines that you make.
Yeah, and I would just like to say about these reopening of these restaurants. I think that people need to see other people going out, and it's going to be very quick. And I can only wish that they're all going to take a bottle of Bollinger to celebrate these deconfinement, together with a good bottle of port of Taylor's, of course, LBV.
Well, I'm sure that people will certainly celebrate coming back out. I think everybody's going to take their own time in their own journey, but undoubtedly, as confidence builds, which it undoubtedly will do, and we're already certainly seeing that in Portugal, because we've been a little bit ahead of other parts of the world, because relative to other parts of the world, Portugal has had a fairly light crisis, and our government has handled it very well. But I think the key point, as you say, is that there's great wines made all over the world. There's great opportunities to celebrate. Life is for celebration. We're not on this planet for that much time, so we should enjoy the opportunities presented. And if that is a question of having a glass of port, or indeed a glass or bottle of champagne, then here's to it, and here's to you. Cheers. Thank you so much for joining me. Etienne Bizot, fantastic.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, all of you. Bye. Twice.